everyone. I'm Cory Bangert from the Influential team. And when Lataria kicked off the event today, she mentioned Equal Pay Day in 2022 was March 15th. I think this is worth repeating because it's a symbolic day that signifies the gender pay gap. So currently, if a man works from January 1st to December 31st and gets paid a salary, a woman would have to work until March 15th of the following year to earn the same salary. If you're a Black woman, you'll have to work longer and even longer than if you're Latina. In influencer marketing, we're seeing that this is the case. While close to 80% of content creators are women focused on targeting other women, we're seeing that male creators are still getting paid on average 30% higher. It's something that we're focused on shifting here at Influential. In 25 years, the pay gap has only shrunk by 8 cents, and that's frankly unacceptable. As Megan Rapinoe recently testified to the House Oversight Committee, one cannot simply outperform inequality. As recently as last night, the Barcelona and Real Madrid's women's match hit record numbers for attendance in women's soccer, over 91,000 fans. And while this is incredible, it further highlights how far we are from where we need to be, especially as women's soccer isn't even always televised. Numbers like last night prove that interest is there, and media coverage highlighting this is hopefully what will help the fans and the sport overall. Today, I'm really excited to talk with Lisa Kolodny Johnson, SVP of Marketing at Rowe, about gender bias in marketing. She has over 20 years of experience across a variety of industries spanning media, travel, food, and now telehealth, where she oversees all marketing and care practices. This includes strategic positioning for new and existing products and conditions, brand development, content and community engagement, and creative execution for all marketing programming across Rowe brands. She's a mom of 2 kids and 2 dogs and a proud breadwinner. I've just said a lot about Lisa, so I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about Rowe.
Cory, thank you so much. It's so nice to be here, and that the Barcelona soccer team, my friends, I'm going to Barcelona in a couple of weeks to visit friends with our kids, and they happened to send me a video this morning of them walking to the game and then seeing the game, and with daughters who play soccer, just super emotional to see those kinds of fans showing up for women's sports and, you know, really like being there because they're there for the players, they're there for the sport, and this really feels like a change. So I'm hoping that all of these things coming together and the media really truly covering it, like you just said, will make a difference in terms of sports marketing, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, back to Rowe. I just have to say that because I got super emotional watching the video.
Oh my God, the pictures, they were incredible. For those who haven't seen them, please go look.
Please Google it now. So Rowe, you know, many of you may have heard of Roman more than Rowe, but we're a direct-to-patient healthcare company. And we are, you know, our purpose is to radically improve life for every one of us. So when you think about healthcare at large, healthcare, particularly in the United States, unlike many consumer products where a marketer would be completely focused on what people want when they're trying to buy things, healthcare is never focused on what patients want, right? It's focused on everything but. And so Rowe, the experience that we're building, the products that we're creating, everything is completely focused on what patients want. Our services they cash pay only, so we don't accept insurance, and we dream of a world where people in the US might not even have to have insurance anymore because your employer might give you a $30,000 credit on a card and you can go vote with your feet on what type of healthcare providers give you. But for now, in terms of telehealth, we offer all of our services cash pay only. So our services span mental health with Rowe Mind, Roman, which is our men's digital men's health clinic, which offers sexual health and hair loss and all sorts of other pieces there. Rowe Derm, which is skincare, and we recently acquired Modern Fertility, as well as a company called Daddy, and we are focused now on fertility offerings, both for men and women, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but there's certainly been bias when it comes to healthcare, particularly around women, the amount of airtime women's issues get, and when it comes to fertility, the amount that women sort of shoulder there. So that's a little overview of Rowe and the work we're doing.
Thanks so much. Well, now on to the fun stuff. I thought today we'd spend our time talking a little bit about women navigating careers in marketing, and then discuss some recent trends you're seeing that are working to fight gender bias in marketing. So I've read and I really believe that you want to be in a room and surround yourself with women who would mention your name in a room full of opportunities. And I'm going to have a little love fest for Lisa right now because I've known her for over 20 years and she's one of those people. A fun fact, I met her when I was an intern. She started a little bit after me, immediately wowed the powers that be of the company with her charisma, wit, and intelligence, which will be on full display today, I'm sure. But she was never too busy to help me. I was like the lowest person on the totem pole, and she was one of my greatest allies. So as I was getting close to graduating, she let me know of all the jobs that were across department and were available, helping me get interviews. And when that didn't work out, she followed up with me for close to 3 years while I was at another company, letting me know every time a position was available and was eager to pass along my resume. So when my dream job actually was finally available, not only did she help me prepare again, but she also gave me guidance during the negotiation. I honestly didn't know what the heck I was doing. And it was ensuring that I was compensated appropriately when I accepted a position. And I just think we'd all be so lucky if we all had a Lisa. So I digress and I'll let her. Lisa, I'd love to have you walk through your journey of how you ended up at Roe and how you've built confidence over the course of your career.
First of all, that was so nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we can have love fest forever, but I think really important is that, to your point, women do, support one another. And, looking through my career, first of all, I'm the youngest daughter of 3 girls. So I always grew up, strong mother, strong grandmothers, strong female influences throughout my life, and a very supportive and amazing, father. So I've been very lucky in that sense when it comes to confidence. I don't think I ever felt not confident in a room, full of men, women, whoever it may be. I've always been, relatively confident. I don't know quite how that happened. I'd say my parents are part of that equation probably. But, when it comes to career, that being said, suddenly you get thrown in, to the workforce, and it really is dependent sometimes on the people who are on the other side of that table, right? And how much they respect you. And there have certainly been times in my career, I started out, I call myself a recovering media executive, but my first job out of college was actually at Deutsche Bank. And I remember very clearly, I was in campus recruiting, that a woman told me, like, literally, you're not the smartest person in the room and you need to adjust your attitude, right? And I remember that really clearly, because first of all, I was like, I didn't think I was acting like I'm the smartest person in the room. Okay. And so that was just kind of like a wake up call for me, in terms of wow, people are going to perceive you in certain ways. And this is not the place for me. And I think the reason I tell you that story is I have always been, my mom has always said to me, you need to trust your gut. And when it comes to career, the times that I haven't trusted my gut have been the times that I have faltered in terms of confidence, right? So anyway, went through media, spent a variety of roles, and there, starting actually in licensing and then moving into a variety of roles in marketing. After my time at NBC, I was part of a women's brand. That was where I met many of the people who have been super formative in terms of my career and in terms of giving me that confidence that I was worth investing in. And, I say that because iVillage, which is where I worked there, was the largest content-driven community for women on the web. It was purchased by NBC for a significant amount of money, and they immediately didn't know what to do with it. They turned it into a TV show hosted by Bill Rancic, who is the winner of the first Apprentice. And it didn't work, right? You can't just take a digital brand and spin it into, at that time, into a TV show with seemingly nothing connected to it. And so when I came in, I was actually hired by a woman who was married to someone I had worked with previously. And I didn't really know what to expect. I just kind of came in there we need you to reposition this brand. I don't even really know what I need you to do. Can you come do this for a few months? And being exposed to the women who work there was something that I would not have expected to impact me in the way that it has. These were incredibly intelligent, incredibly driven, creative, business-minded women who pulled up a seat next to them and said, let me teach you about this. And when I say this, it was not just work, it was also life, right? And for the first time, I think in my life, I saw women, I was considering marrying my husband, who's a musician, like not the kind of person on paper necessarily where you're like, oh, great, like really financially sound. And, they were all these breadwinners around me, all of these people who are showing me how you can, make your own career, et cetera. Anyway, so Jody Kahn, who is the president there, became a mentor of mine. And, when you talk about building confidence in your career, having in particular for me, someone like Jody who would sit down, walk me through business things that, expose me to things that I would not get exposure to at my level, but because she wanted me to learn, became really critical in me being able to understand, one, the type of leader that I wanted to be, but two, what opportunities were out there for me. So iVillage was huge. Then I went to, some e-commerce worlds, and then I'm not going to go through it all, but I'm here every step along the way. I will say there's been times that I've been knocked down, right? And laid off or, experienced some really crazy things, but having that network of people that I built along the way was huge in keeping my confidence intact.
That's awesome. I mean, like I said, it's incredible to have people as a network to support you along the way. So outside of Jody, is there any meaningful advice that you consider on a day-to-day as you're looking at how to move forward and lead?
And that's a great question. I think, we sort of talked about this yesterday. I think there's advice that comes to you at different times in your career. And I actually did a podcast recently where I talked about not all good feedback and not all advice is good, right? So it's like, you have to really, as you, get through your career and sort of, I wouldn't call it climbing the ranks, but like, are more experienced, you have to learn which types of feedback, including advice to take to heart and what to not, right? So like the advice that like, you're not the smartest person in the room. Okay.
Like, advice.
Like maybe that's no ego amigo. I don't know, but like, whatever. I took what I needed from that. I think, my mom telling me to always trust your gut. I got, I've been in experiences where I haven't trusted my gut and it's come out, it's hurt me and my career, frankly, in ways. When it comes to, other advice that I've received over the years, one thing that really stood out for me actually was that, and this is just when you're talking about bias, right? And this was a really eye-opening experience for me in terms of like, wow, I can't believe I even asked this question, but like was getting ready to build a team at Fresh Direct, which was an online grocer that I worked for, and was bringing along someone who had worked with me. And so like, literally I was like, I'm just going to redo your resume, get in, we're going to get you in with this recruiter today and we'll just seal this deal. So it was moving very quickly. And, she says to me, I think like after she interviewed, she says, listen, like I'm 10 weeks pregnant. Is that going to be a problem? And, now if someone said that to me, there would not be any, I wouldn't even question it. But I actually went to my boss at the time and was like, this person's 10 weeks pregnant. Is that a problem? She's like, why would you ask? Jody, it was Jody again, looked at me. She's like, why would you ask that? Like, that is literally like, why did you even think to ask that? Would you hire you if you were pregnant? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Like that's not even a question someone should ask. And I think like, it's just interesting that came up for me as a memory, which was like, sometimes I wasn't saying that because I didn't think she could do the job, but it was good to reflect back that like, that is a biased thing to say. You were just more worried about yourself because she wouldn't be there when you're relying on her, right? But it came out in the wrong way. So I think what I took from that is like, you really have to like, as a woman, to be there and to be supportive for other women, you have to watch what comes out of your mouth and the sort of like table that you're setting for others, because even asking a dumb question like that, if someone else had been in the room, could have sent the wrong message.
Totally. And so I guess like when you're in situations like that and you do ask that question and, obviously she had a response that pointed you in the right direction, but what do you start to do sometimes when like self-doubt creeps in and you're in a situation? Like, how do you kind of pivot yourself back?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, self-doubt happens, even for confident people, right? Self-doubt is going to happen because there's just a lot, first of all, there's a lot of information coming in at all times, I would say, right? Like, and I think the way to get over that is, and it is to just be like, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? Like if I put this out there, or if I say something, that I have to refine later, if you're an authentic person and people know that it's coming from the right place in the workforce, I think, and someone on the panel before was talking about the work environment that you work in and the type of culture you work in. You should be able to feel safe, and that self-doubt should actually make you grow because you push through it. And the worst thing that happens in a career setting, at least, is you put something out there and you get fired, I guess, and I've been laid off multiple times, and I think every single time, and that's not being fired, but like every single time you come out on the other side of it because you've learned. So self-doubt, I try to not let it creep in.
I mean, we're all human, right?
I think, the bias, or people talk a lot about, oh my God, the term is totally like sort of flying away from me right now, but just like how women do have less self-confidence and do have a lot more self-doubt, frankly, than men. And so really trying to like physically work through that and show other women that are working in an organization like a strong,
right, that we all deserve a seat at the table.
Right. Presentation style, like they don't all need to know that I have self-doubt. I might tell them afterward, but
Yeah. Well, kind of to continue on that point. So over the last week, there's been obviously a huge gender-focused power struggle. It's impossible to ignore with Ketanji Brown Jackson during the confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court. This is unfortunately like not uncommon. So has there been a time where you've been in a gender-driven power struggle that you've noticed?
I mean, yes. Yeah. And I think
you're like, which one?
Right. Well, I mean, I think, look, as much as workplaces should not be political, from time to time, they end up being political. And oftentimes, and especially coming up through media, by the way, there was a lot more of that, right? But I will say I have been in a situation, and again, this is where that intuition, or just like listening to your body's gut reaction, becomes very important for me, at least, because I'm a feeler. Like I had put together this incredible amount of work, and I think a really amazing approach to launching a new market at one of my organizations. And I present it to a room full of, men, maybe a couple of other women, but largely a room full of men. And the CEO looks, after I present it, basically like looks past me and says, "Hey, Chris, what do you think?" Right. And it was like, just like he needed a man to confirm that these concepts, or like this plan that I had led and, he had participated in, was right. And I remember in that moment feeling so incredibly frustrated, and that realizing that, I was at that time reporting to that CEO, and that was a new structure because, my mentor had been, had left, and I realized how much she had shielded us from that sort of interaction, and that she had been doing that on our behalf so that we, didn't be made to feel this way. And so I felt incredibly sad in that moment, but I also felt like, well, why am I here? Right? Like, why have you actually, invested in my career and had me put this together if ultimately you're just going to ask someone else what we should do? Right. And that is when my gut sort of like went into, I didn't listen to it immediately, but it started going into like, hey, I'm alerting you, right, that this is not right for you anymore. Because, and I wish I would have listened earlier, because that type of microaggression kept happening, and it really did chip away at my confidence in ways that then manifested in like physical panic attacks, right? And so really important for people to understand that when that type of thing is happening, you have to react to it. Anyways, I think, in that Ketanji Brown Jackson, the whole thing was crazy to watch a lot of it. But I will say watching Cory Booker come to her aid was incredible, right? And actually emotional for her, of course, and for him. But the world needs more Cory Bookers, right? And like had someone in that room when this man overlooked me and my work, said, hey, actually, like, why don't you have Lisa let you know why this is whatever? It would have felt 1 million times better for me, right? So I just am saying that because I think when we're talking about gender bias and power struggles at work, you know, it's not just about men and women, of course. There's so many different shades of this, but people have to be paying attention when they see this at play, and really come to one another's aid, because it can like make an incredible difference.
Right. The allyship is the essential part of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, to shift gears a little bit. So in the past few years, there's been a huge movement focused on female equality and inclusion. So at Row, how are you addressing gender equality as a company in your hiring practices, company culture, and marketing efforts, ensuring everyone has a seat at the table?
Oh man, it's a good one, because Row is doing a lot. And actually part of the reason that I chose to come to this organization was because of, you know, there's a variety of factors for me that were important, from culture to having working parents to having female leadership, you know, sitting at the table, but also to the diversity approach that we were taking in hiring practices. And so, you know, our long-term goal for Row's employee makeup is to reflect the diversity of the population. And we talk about it frequently. It's you know, at all hands, we talk about it. We talk about it at leadership. And we're fostering a culture where equity and inclusion are really woven into the way we approach everything that we do. And so, some, you know, stats that I was just looking at, you know, 33% of our leadership team is female. It's just above the global average. I know we're constantly looking to promote and hire there, but our primary focus is really on improving diversity in our tech org, which is our largest org. And also, you know, where we're hiring the most, and it feels like that's where we can have the most change. And, you know, just to give you a note, across the tech industry as a whole, it's estimated that women make up just 25%, which is crazy, of tech workers. At Row, we are getting close to 50%, if not already at 50% of our tech org being female. And then, of course, we're also focusing deeply on URM. And so, you know, I am really excited to see the work that's being done there. And, you know, it's a hot market right now when it comes to hiring. And so it's no small feat that our recruiting team and you know, hiring managers are so dedicated to this across the board. So I think, you know, that's really heartening. What was the second part of your question?
Well, I think something that we kind of discussed in relation to this question is maybe talking through some of the different things you guys are doing to smash the stigmas around health conditions, especially as it's related to gender bias.
Oof, good one. Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit up top, right? There's stigmas around, you know, when it comes to medical conditions in particular, there's stigmas all over the place, right? For men, there's, you know, around erectile dysfunction, which is largely where we started, stigmatized condition, even though, you know, there had been a lot of awareness of it, but still something people aren't willing to really talk frankly about. And so from Roman's perspective, and maybe where people are the most aware of our brands, we have taken what we would say is like an unconditional, like a unapologetic approach to talking about sex and talking about with erectile dysfunction, that its impact actually on your life. It's not just, you know, some other brands out there will just make it about eggplant emojis. And, you know, it's really an emotional condition, right? And it's an emotional thing that doesn't just impact you, but it impacts actually your partner. It impacts your confidence, and even like sitting on the couch close to one another. I mean, it creeps into other aspects of your life. And so we've done a lot of work sort of digging deep on consumer insights there, and actually starting to create conversations between couples about, you know, their role in just, and I'm just talking about erectile dysfunction there, but then we've also looked at things where, like fertility, that I think we've made big investments in over the last year with our acquisitions. And the reason being, one, when it comes to women's health, right? Like there's tons of research out there that women's health is just under funded in terms of research, right? Particularly when you get to things like menopause, and we can talk about the amazing things that some brands are doing out there for menopause, including former boss of mine, who's the CEO of Our Kindra, and is just doing an incredible job of like driving conversation around this, how it impacts women at work, how it, how it really, again, same thing, it impacts your confidence, it impacts the way you show up, right? And so how can we normalize this conversation? And I love that these brands are doing this. When it comes to Roe, modern fertility, they have been very focused on putting control into women's hands around fertility data, right? And the modern fertility hormone test is actually creating a category. This has never existed. People didn't know they could take a test at home to get some sort of understanding of those fertility levels and what it all means. It's like,
how accessible it is.
Right. It's incredible. So, that's huge. And that team has done an amazing job. And then recently, we've been really discussing with different audiences, though, that there's this misconception that fertility is actually a women's issue. And it's not only untrue, it's actually unfair to women, right? And so women tend to carry the burden of like, TikTok, you're getting older, like you can't, freeze your eggs, whatever, that type of messaging is, when in fact 33% of cases of infertility are female factor, but 33% are male factor, and 33% are caused by something that's unknown, which means, right, that men play a role in this, and we just have not started having an equal role in this, and we have not started having conversations where men would maybe even understand that as society at large. So we're working to normalize this conversation. We've just sort of gotten started around this. So whereas modern fertility is, there for people with ovaries or women to understand their fertility, we've also launched Rose Sperm Kit, which is really for, people with sperm or men to understand their sperm health and then have the opportunity to store that. And so now you can see that there's options, to help educate on both sides. And so we're really excited about the type of messaging that we'll be doing there to help sort of knock down gender bias, particularly when it comes to fertility.
And then one thing I wanted to touch on, because you mentioned it and I thought it was pretty interesting, was Roe Derm and your guys' approach within that segment.
Yeah, this is really interesting. We just recently relaunched our prescription skincare business, which is, really exciting. And we initially, it had been offered underneath these gendered clinics on our website. And there's really no reason that skincare should be gendered, right? And one of the things that we observed is skincare, is like for everyone, first of all. And then when it comes to skincare and sort of traditional, and skincare is very interesting because you're sort of in the same category as beauty brands can be, right? You're delving into wellness and beauty brands. And so the competitive sort of category is much larger. But for us, because you're looking at making, dermatological, that word is very hard to say, prescription grade skincare more accessible, we really wanted it to be truly more accessible for everyone. And so we like to talk about, aging comes in here, right? And ageism in general, you have a lot of brands who are out that like, get that dewy, perfect glow, like whatever this is, there's so much pressure, with influencers and just image out there and filters and people who are wanting to look, they're staring at themselves all day on Zoom and they want better skin.
Right.
We did not want to add to that pressure. Again, understanding that be comfortable in the skin that you're in, you have your own goals. This is about your confidence. So we say that we're pro aging, right? And aging like pros. So if this is like, you want to get rid of dark spots, great. You want to reduce wrinkles, great. We're not dictating. We're just, we're here to sort of help. We've made a very gender neutral brand with Roe Derm, so that any gender can feel comfortable going through that online visit and not feel like they're going through something that is, biologically made for men or women. Right. And that helps us with accessibility across the board. So we're just getting started there, but we're seeing really great uptick with the new brand and adoption, and we're super pumped.
I'm excited for that because as we were talking about earlier, that article that was written in the Morning Brew yesterday, talking about how only 7% of people in advertising are over 60 years old, and it's 2 to 1 men versus women. So I look to, Ro Derm to lead the change in that.
Well,
front.
even on that, Cory, like, I don't know if anyone here has seen our commercial, and I'll stop talking about Ro, but for Roman, one of our latest commercial is, it's called Code Words, and it's couples, making like want to do the taxes, right? And it's obvious that they're like going off to do something. But the last couple is a couple who is clearly, above 60 years old, 70, and they're fun. Like they're going to go, and the woman actually has a really great zinger of a line. And we felt really great about that because like women, empowering older women and older men to like, just really show them, in their life. It doesn't mean just because you turn a certain age that you don't have sex. Right. So like really showing them in a way that's empowering and funny. That it resonated very well with audiences and with our own when we tested it. And I think it was just, I was excited to see a woman take that role on. And the couple is a real couple in real life. And they were just awesome.
That's so cool. So I think a really fun thing as we prepared for this conversation was talking through a lot of the examples that we've been seeing about gender bias in media. So I wanted to give you this opportunity to kind of walk through some of your favorites that have been current.
Okay. Well, you know this. So I've mentioned a couple of times that I'm the breadwinner. My family, I'm very passionate when it comes to women in finances and even negotiating what you're worth, etc. One of the things, a former iVillage actually editor who I'm still very close with, she wrote a book called Think Like a Breadwinner, which was really like a call for women to get started early in their lives with the mentality that you should be building long-term wealth. And one of the things she had highlighted for me in our discussions was that in her research, she saw that both parents and media starts talking to boys at a very young age, right, about investment and long-term planning versus the language that is used for girls is like, save to splurge, skip that latte to buy your Manolo Blahniks, right? And it's not focused on longer term investments. So why I'm talking about this is that Gray actually came out with a campaign for Mass Mutual in the last couple of weeks that I think, totally taps into this cultural bias that women are somehow, and in their case, the bias that they have highlighted is that women are bad with money. And that actually a recent study came out that shows that 65% of financial articles target women as excessive spenders. Okay, so we talked about sort of microaggressions before. The media has a huge role when playing in this gender bias and sort of upkeeping these things. So what I love about this campaign is it features headlines in sort of like old school newspaper looking, font. I wish I knew what the font was. It's not, we should have figured that one out. But, and the headlines, one of the best headlines is she wastefully spends, right? And then it asterisks and highlights this piece. And I think, Mass Mutual is bringing this across digital. They have print pieces. I think Washington Post was last week. Then you also see, brands like Ellevest and other financial institutions. And I know you said that, you all work with a lot of financial companies who are really turning their attention to elevating women, not only, as earners, but as long-term investors and wealth builders. And I think I'm just so excited to see it. So that was one that I wanted to talk about. I think another one that came to mind, and it was, actually, you brought this to me. You want to talk about the sports, like bringing it back to sports?
Yeah, this was one that we saw. I mean, again, we had so much fun with it this week. And I think it's very timely given the focus of the month. But it was the YWCA in Canada. They put M in front of all of the sports leagues. So it was like MNBA, MPGA, MNHL. And it was kind of like, why are we defaulting to men's as the NBA, but not, and then WNBA? Because like at the best, it considers the women's league as like additive, but like at the worst leaves them completely out of the conversation.
Ridiculous.
So well, I thought, Oh, Tara, are we coming to an end?
No, I mean, you guys, First of all, this was a fantastic question. We have a couple more minutes.
Okay.
I love, you guys sort of came full circle, like talked about microaggressions in like it being an employee.
Mhm.
And then also like sort of talking about the microaggressions that show up in our work and how those things are so connected. And it's just like a perfect way to end the segment. So thank you for that question in this conversation. I will say that my favorite part about your talk today was
Mhm.
just seeing a real live mentor-mentee relationship play out, which I just wasn't expecting. And literally the best advertisement for like how important mentorship is and the long tail of it, not even just, when you're signing up for a mentorship and in the moment you see the
Right.
6 month sponsorship or whatever, but like you guys have had a relationship for most of your career, Cory,
I
and
know, I'm so lucky.
I
And
love
when
it.
this was coming up, she was the first person I reached out to, and she wrote back in like 30 seconds. And I'm so grateful for that.
I love it. May we all have Lisa,
Right?
like to be Lisa,
You
Lisa like
guys, come
mentor.
on. We're gonna try.
And may the world be devoid of the Chris's who are.
Right.
It wasn't Chris. Poor Chris. He actually was a nice person. The other one. I just
The
ignored a
CEO.
little bit. Yeah, the CEO. Anyway,
Yes,
thank
yes.
you
And
so
also
much.
it's hard, right? It's hard work to be an ally. And so we have a couple of men who are actually going to be moderating, which we're excited about, but it's going to take men to sort of stand up in this moment to support women and to call things out when we see it. But we know how uncomfortable it could be for a person like Chris and like what type of bravery chops Cory Booker even had to sort of dig in to lift his voice and on behalf of Ketanji Brown Jackson. So it is not easy work. None of this is, but I'm thankful that you guys are here doing it for sure.
Thank you. And I was going to say to that, I think like it also, I do truly believe sometimes like people don't even see the bias when it's happening.
Right.
And so it takes cultures too, organizations who will do the learning and development, who will put that work in to help us all be better. And I do want to call that out, that I think Row is an incredible place for that. We invest so much, but any organizations, if you're on this and you think about where you can invest, making sure there's trainings and making sure you're helping encourage people to identify bias is really huge.
I love it. And it also seems like not only is Row doing the work sort of internally, but it's also coming out in your products. And like that is the benefit I think most companies need to see, is that when you take care of the bias within your organization, like the fruits of that work is just like boundless.
You're totally right. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you again so much, Lisa. Thank you, Cory. I appreciate you both.